Hi, this is Tej Virk, president of Khiron Life Sciences Europe. You're listening to Professionally Cannabis.
Where do they go, the smoke rings I blow each night?
Hello, and welcome to the Lockdown Podcast. The Professionally Cannabis Podcast. With me today is my co-host, Johnny Weiser, and I'm Oscar Houseman. And I hope all of you are staying at home, unless, of course, you're doing essential frontline key work. How are you locked down, Johnny?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. I'm all right. I have been taking time to do a few extracurricular tasks, one of which is I took a few hours last weekend to see if I can learn the Pavarotti opera song, Nessun Dorma.
And did you learn Nessun Dorma?
I'm getting there. I'm past the point where I can just belt out Vincero at the end, but still a little while until I've got all the words sort of locked in my head. But it seems that we're going to have another few weeks of self-isolation. So I think by the end of this isolatory times, I should be able to give you a really nice rendition.
And is that you as in me, or you as in me and our listeners? Because I'm sure they'd love to hear your operatic abilities.
I think we'll have to wait and see on that one.
Listeners, if you want to hear Johnny sing, phone our hotline.
0800 Nessun Dorma. And how about you, Oscar? How are you getting along?
I'm also acquiring new skills. I've been sanding down some pallets. I've bought some wood stain, and I'm getting ready to make some balcony furniture to enjoy the little bit of fresh air I'm entitled to.
Oh, what are you going to go for?
Well, I quite like the pallet's natural hue, so I don't think I'll want to darken it too much. And I've got a sort of bench creation with 3 pallets horizontal and 1 vertically behind it. Looks quite nice to me.
Well, how innovative we are, but in terms of innovation, our guests that we have on the podcast far supersede us. So, Oscar, can you tell our listeners who we had on the podcast this week?
Yes, we had Tej Virk, the president of Europe for Khiron, a Colombia-based cultivation operation that's got international ambitions that centre on our sceptred isle. Well, more our sceptred continent. I think they're more interested in Germany than the UK, but they do have some UK plays as well.
Yeah, they've got a number of really interesting projects taking place around the medical cannabis market in Europe, and also not the first LP that we've had on the podcast that have Colombian operations. I really enjoyed our chat with Tej, and I think our listeners will too.
Where do they go, the smoke rings
I'm happy to say that joining us today is Tej Virk, president at Khiron Life Sciences, a Canadian cannabis producer with much of their core operations based out of Colombia. Making waves across both medical cannabis and health and wellness consumer goods, Khiron have kicked off the year in a big way with an arsenal of investment and innovations to support their 2020 initiatives. Tej, welcome to Professionally Cannabis.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us here on Professionally Cannabis, Tej. And I'd like to start, well, I actually have no choice. I always start with the question, what led you to the plant?
It's a great question. As you might be able to tell, despite living in the UK for the better part of 13 years, I actually grew up in Canada. Canada actually led the world, interestingly enough, in creating a very open market for both medical and recreational cannabis. This all happened while I was living in the UK and in London, but I was definitely paying attention. And at the time, I was working as an investment banker for a leading Canadian bank, and one part of me was very interested in seeing this come to fruition and all of the sort of big financings that would come with this and helping to grow the industry globally. But then on the personal side, part of me has always been very interested in life sciences and helping others. I think back when I was in university, I did as much as I could do to cover off my medical school prerequisites so that I could study to be a doctor one day. That never happened, but I always wanted to, kind of help people in some way, shape, or form. And I think this sort of afforded that opportunity to do that.
Now, one of the things I'd like to touch upon is that before you joined Khiron, you previously had cut your cannabis teeth, so to speak, at Canopy Growth. As someone that has experience from the inside of 2 major LPs, I'd love to get your insight into the sort of key learnings you've been able to apply at Khiron from your previous working experience at Canopy Growth.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when I was a banker in my former life, I was working with many different companies in the space, and Canopy was one of my clients. And I thought that they had this incredible head start, this global footprint, which gave them an advantage in terms of being able to set the pace for the industry and really capture that mind share with consumers and patients alike. And they were capitalized to do it as well. They received a circa $5 billion injection in terms of financing from Constellation Brands, which is a large spirits and alcohol producer in the United States. And that afforded them to really expand quickly. And I wanted to be a part of it. I mentioned my interest in the industry, and I thought that this really provided the perfect opportunity. And I was very fortunate to have spent time with Bruce Linton, who was then co-CEO of the company. And together we found an opportunity that made a lot of sense for me being based in Europe, kind of helping to grow those operations. So I joined as a managing director of Canopy Growth in Europe. And I think for me, it was really an eye-opening experience because there were so many things that needed to be put in place to foster medical cannabis in Europe. So just to clarify, what I was working on in Canopy was purely medical, as the European market is focused on that. It was really getting to know all the very complex regulations that exist with medical cannabis, to understand exactly how you can create products for the market which adhere to these regulations. And this is really sort of verging on pharmaceuticals and understanding pharmaceutical processes, as Europe is probably one of the most strict places to bring medical products to the market, much more strict than places like Canada even, or the United States, and in some parts of the US, and in the way that medical cannabis is rolled out. Europe is pharma grade. So that was something that was kind of a key learning from being at Canopy. Khiron had what I thought a few of the key ingredients to be very successful in medical cannabis in the long run. It was much more focused on the medical opportunity. So Canopy, while incredible people, I think they had a lot on their plate, trying to serve a consumer base in North America and in Canada in particular, which is recreationally focused, while at the same time also juggling patients. And patients were in Canada, they were in Europe, and kind of dividing your time and your assets and your resources around those two markets. It's challenging. And I think what's very interesting about Khiron is that over the long run, I think there are some structural advantages, such as one, having the sort of obvious advantage of being in Colombia, where that's a place where we have a lot of our growing capacity. You've got abundant sunlight, amazing climate conditions for growing. So you get a cost advantage that way. But then it's not just about being a low cost play. This isn't coffee. What we have in Colombia is actually a full chain of clinics. So we have wholly owned clinics, which are currently helping patients with neuropathic pain and other related issues. We currently serve about 120,000 patients in Colombia. And so what's amazing is that we're able to kind of create our product there and then serve the patients. And so we have about 60 doctors on staff. And through that, we're able to create proprietary therapies and key learnings, which we can export to other places in the world. And that's where I saw the opportunity. You have this vertically integrated company in Colombia, great products, great ideas, and then exporting that to Europe.
Wow. I had no idea you had 120,000 patients in Colombia. That's incredible. I'd kind of like to get onto that. But before we get into anything too deep, I suppose, could you give our listeners an overall outline of what Khiron holds? So you've got Colombia, but I believe you joined your Khiron journey. Not quite the way I want to phrase it, but you joined Khiron as Khiron Europe's president. So could you give us a global perspective on what Khiron holds? And then maybe we can look at the detail, some of the things that I certainly wasn't aware of, the number of patients you're serving and the proprietary formulations a bit after.
Absolutely. So to take a big picture view on Khiron, so Khiron Life Sciences is a publicly traded company. We're listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange Venture. The core operations are in Colombia. So our headquarters is in Bogota. And what we have in Colombia around that would be a grow facility, which is a few hours south of Bogota, in a place called Doima. And there we're growing cannabis in a kind of a covered outdoor facility. Adjacent to it is a state-of-the-art, world-class extraction lab. So we're taking our plants, which produce the APIs, so the active pharmaceutical ingredients. The key ones that we are isolating for are CBD and THC. And we're creating medical extracts out of those. So in the Colombian market, they're referred to as magisterial preparations, where we blend the extracts with oils and create these bottles with syringes that we can then dispense to patients. On the dispensation side, and this is where I think it's a key advantage for Khiron, is that we have wholly owned clinics. In the clinics, so there's two brands actually. There's ELANS, which is a Spanish acronym, but it stands for the Latin American Institute of Neurology and Neuropathic Pain. And then there's a new concept which we brought to the market called Zerenia. ELANS was an existing chain of clinics which has been around for years, and they focus on chronic pain, but also other disorders. So it's kind of like an outpatient clinic. Our mission is to bring medical cannabis to that channel. So I mentioned earlier that we have 120,000 patients currently. So that's existing patients. And last year we did something like 154,000 medical transactions. And this is all pre-medical cannabis. What's news is that approximately a week ago, we received the final certification from the Colombian government to distribute legal medical cannabis. This is a huge piece of news. It was probably lost, I think, in a lot of the sort of noise in the market right now. I know there's bigger pressing world events right now, but from being able to help patients with positive outcomes, this is a big deal. And it's estimated that in Colombia, there are approximately 6 million patients that make sense for them to try medical cannabis. So that's the Colombian market. And we have everything in place to do that. And it's important to have those clinics because Colombia has incredibly strict regulations when it comes to dispensation of cannabis, as well as export. You need to apply for both domestic and international quotas for production. And we are the only company to evidence demand for domestic use. So we are the only ones with a domestic quota being able to actually produce and distribute. We will be aiming for THC very soon. We received our first license, well, Colombia's first license to cultivate THC plants. So those plants are already underway, and we expect this to follow a similar process for bringing the medicines to the market. So we've kind of done the trailblazing with CBD and now THC. But when it comes to Europe, we're definitely focused on the same strategy. We don't necessarily have to rely on our Colombian supply. We have a bit more latitude as to where we bring supply from, given that we have a huge amount of experience in bringing products to the market. We might be able to find some solutions in the near term that are closer to home. But over the long run, we want to bring CBD and THC products over from Colombia.
You alluded to, or actually more like directly mentioned, sourcing product from outside of your Colombian grow. And I think that aligns to perhaps a common, maybe not criticism, but sense that difficulty with Colombian operations is that under current Colombian law, you're only allowed to export, I believe, oils, but under current German medical law, the market really is only there for flower. So you've got a bit of a gap there. One of them has to give. And so if you're planning to serve the market in the near term, it looks like you would have to do that from a third party. Is that the reasoning behind your choice here?
Yeah, so good clarification question. So we haven't explicitly talked about supplying the market with flower. So at the moment, Khiron is focused on creating medical extracts. So we would be looking at ways to bring our extracts over either via import or working out another way to recreate them here. When it comes to flower, I think that's a bigger question. Look, I think we have a capital light strategy for the most part when it comes to Europe. So if we were to bring flower to the market for places like Germany, I think we would be looking at more of a contract manufacturing style route.
And with regards to the Colombian grows, what's the setup there? Is it indoor, outdoor, hybrid? How are you guys going about your cultivation out there?
Yeah, sure. So we have an outdoor covered grow. We have over 20 government registered strains. So we have a good genetic library, which give us a lot of variety. And adjacent to the outdoor grow is a state-of-the-art world-class extraction lab. So it's all integrated on one site. In terms of capacity, we're looking at approximately 8 tons per year of grow capacity and double that on the extraction side. And in terms of being able to scale and grow in the future, there's plenty of room to do that. Now that the site is largely built, you're able to double capacity for very low capital. But that's Colombia. So in Colombia, we wanted to have our own owned asset, and that's strategic. But I think in the future, if we're working in other markets, we're probably looking at ways to outsource things like grow.
Now, moving on slightly, last year you completed a strong investment round and seemingly caught the market at the perfect time, ahead of the downturn. Could you tell us more about that and how, as an organization, you approach fundraisers?
Sure. So I think last year was a tricky year for the cannabis industry, to say the least. I think we were very fortuitous to raise in that window and really be smart with the capital, because we could have raised and we could have gone out on a tear, spending on high cost initiatives. You can see the rest of the industry. I think there's many examples. Instead, we chose to be very prudent about our spend and really focus on projects that deliver a solid ROI. And that's where the focus has been. When it comes to the future, I think that we'll be very carefully managing dilution. So this is a conversation that I've had with our president, Chris Naprava, who looks after some of the institutional investors and has been behind our historic financings. But we're going to be very careful about that. I mean, we don't necessarily see a lot of sense in issuing shares at levels like this. And in fact, we announced a short while ago a normal course issuer bid, which would allow us to buy up to $5 million of stock. That's how much we believe in the opportunity when it comes to our shares.
And on the subject of capital markets and shares, it would be remiss of us not to mention the elephant in the room, which is the global shutdown caused by coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19 or however we want to talk about it. How's it impacting Khiron? And have you guys yet come up with a plan of attack with how to deal with it? Maybe it's early days for that thinking.
Yeah, I think that's very much on our minds. And I think I'll start by saying that nobody was prepared for this type of event. And it's a systematic event which is affecting all businesses in different ways. And I think that we have some strategies for how to cope. I mean, we're all working from home or from locations where we can employ social distancing and follow all of the government regs. And also, I mean, most importantly, keep safe. And that's the most important thing, is that we want our employees to be safe and healthy. And that's priority number one. But, we're affording to us all the use of all of the sort of the typical tools like Microsoft Teams. And, we're staying in touch that way. But if you look at the business, there's some interesting things that I think are worth mentioning. In Colombia, we actually have a complete sort of control over our distribution network. So I mentioned the clinics and dispensation, but we also have telemedicine options as well. That wasn't something that came around as a result of COVID-19. That was something that was built in the distribution. With that, patients that aren't able to come to the clinic because of health problems, arthritis, or just to name one of them, they're able to get medical attention over the phone. And we also have the delivery network behind that as well. So telemedicine helps us mitigate some of this in a place like Colombia. When it comes to Europe, as we're still building out, it's something that is affecting us less than you think, but if we look forward a little bit, we do have some strategies to mitigate. And actually, this serves as a good interlude to talk a bit about Project 2021. In my overview of Europe, I didn't get a chance to mention it earlier, but Khiron is part of a large observational study called Project 2021, which is led by Drug Science, which is a well-known independent drug policy advisor in the UK. And the study aims to be Europe's largest source of data for the efficacy of medical cannabis for patient use. And it's aiming to enroll 20,000 patients in the UK by 2021 and really look at medical cannabis and its effects across 7 key indications, which are kind of the usual suspects for medical cannabis. They include chronic pain, PTSD, anxiety, epilepsy, and more. We've signed up as a supplier to that. One of the interesting things about Project 2021 is that the way that medical cannabis will be prescribed to that study is that it will be done through clinics with the specialist prescribers. And most interestingly, the CQC has given the green light for telemedicine for medical cannabis prescription. So that kind of mirrors what we're seeing in Colombia. So as we start to bring product in to the UK, which should be hopefully soon, we'll be able to get it prescribed by telemedicine. And one of the parts of our supply chain which we've put in place is also to have mail order. Effectively, you'll be able to do all of this over the phone.
In the UK?
In the UK.
That sounds very exciting. Do you know when the first patients will start seeing medicines?
So the study was, I think, officially launched in November. It has the support of the United Patient Alliance and the British Pain Society, as well as the Royal College of Psychiatrists. And having met with the Drug Science Advisory Board, where we do have patient representation, we have someone who attends from the UPA. Patients are anxious to get their hands on product, understandably. The bottleneck has been figuring out the regulatory hoops to bring product over, I think, for most suppliers. And also, I think this is the first time that anything has really been done like this in a large scale in the UK, because to me, this is creating the medical cannabis market in earnest in the UK. You'll have specialist prescribers in the clinics and the system for prescription. I mean, it's like a shadow NHS, but just for medical cannabis. And sadly, there's not reimbursement at this time. Patients are paying out of pocket, but it's a reasonable price. And so I think it's just about the process flow and design and getting that put together. We're making huge progress every week. And the people at the Drug Science are incredibly helpful. Dr. David Nutt, David Badcock, Dr. David Horn, they're very supportive, and they want to work to really get the product in the patient's hands, but also to really kick off the study. And so I expect that we'll see some products get into the study imminently. I'd be disappointed if it didn't happen in this upcoming month. But I think that's when the kickoff will be. And then, we have our plans to bring in product throughout the year. So I think we'll see it happen very soon.
Now, one of the things we touched upon earlier is the fact that, you're the president for the European operations for Khiron and, very much scaling a team over here. How do you go about scaling a team in Europe and retaining and maintaining the spirit, the values and the company culture that is and has been born out of the main hubs where the organization is born?
Yeah, it's a challenge for any company that is a global company where you have offices in different countries. I mean, I'm no stranger to this, working for a multinational bank in the past and a multinational cannabis company as well. So you do have to spend time in really keeping that culture connection alive. And that involves the occasional trip to Colombia. It involves staying in touch with the HR in Colombia that have all sorts of ideas on maintaining culture. And we have different things that we like to focus on for Khiron's culture in Colombia, like being very close to our families. And that actually plays out in the clinic's philosophy as well. It's about really integrating family into the medical cannabis journey. Keeping those things present, it's a challenge, but we do our best. But then at the same time, there's also like a distinctly European culture as well. I mean, Germans and Colombians, they're different people. So, we try to localize as well.
And keeping on the European theme, of course, Germany, the UK, natural that these would be the two core markets at the moment for Khiron and indeed a number of LPs that are looking at a European play. Where else are you guys looking as countries that could be the secondary markets that you really look to penetrate?
Yeah, sure. So I think the markets that are well developed are probably ones that everyone else knows, or at least when I say well developed, meaning that they're open, there's actually access. And that includes places like Poland or Czech Republic, but there really aren't too many more, I think, beyond that. And to be honest, these are not near-term focuses for us. We really want to focus on being successful in the UK and Germany, and that is plenty of opportunity and work for us to do.
Well, from the conversation that we've had, it sounds like that your hands are going to be plenty full with the UK, Germany and all the other projects that you've got going on. And I know that both me and Oscar will be really fascinated to hear from you again, sort of once Project 2021 is fully in motion and see how that's rolling out. I think for now, that's all we have time for. So I'd say, Tej, thank you so much for joining us on the Professionally Cannabis Podcast.
Thanks very much. Really appreciate your time and look forward to keeping you apprised of new developments. And I think there'll be some exciting things to discuss.
Where do they go? The smoke rings I blow each night.
Well, listeners, we hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, the customary request to please do like, share, subscribe and comment on the pod. Additionally, if you have a particular interest in companies that have Colombian operations, you can certainly go back and check out other episodes in the Professionally Cannabis series, notably those where we interviewed the CEOs of both Cleverly's and Avocana.
3 fine Colombian companies indeed, Johnny. But really, can we get back to what I and all our listeners have been waiting for, which is your rendition of Pavarotti?
Unfortunately, that's not going to happen this week. Stay tuned, and I could well give a rendition later on in the series.
I'm going to keep asking for it. Until next week, listeners. Goodbye.
Hello, please take me above, take me with you.